My name is Laurie, and I'm here to present a case that I have ethical considerations with. I have an 11-year-old boy I've been seeing for case management, and then I began seeing him for therapy. He started off as a tutoring client, and then he was having so many behavioral problems both at home and in school that I was able to get a referral for case management. And in that, it's identified that he has some trauma, and his behaviors can either one be attributed to ADHD or two be attributed to the trauma and the lifestyle he had prior to placement. He spent the first year in foster care with one grandparent. She was unable to continue caring for him due to his behaviors, so he was placed with his siblings with another grandparent. The second grandparent is, however, not his biological grandparent, though she was willing to take him in as long as he didn't have sexual behaviors. It came to light that he did in fact have sexual behaviors, and the grandmothers asked on several occasions to have him removed from the home, and was told if he was removed, then they would also take the siblings that she's trying to adopt. The siblings have pretty much been in her care for most of their lives, and she's finding it hard to reconcile the fact that she has to take him in order to keep the other ones. It seems she's now becoming more and more reluctant to try to have a relationship with the child. She's at the point she's identified she does not want to adopt him with the siblings. The child that I am seeing is in foster care because his mother has a substance use history and had addictions to the point she could not be a competent parent. So in looking at her competency level, it was been determined that parental rights would be terminated. This past month, they filed for terminations, and they were terminated with the grandparents moving forward with the adoption process. This case becomes even more convoluted in the fact that the child believes he's going to be adopted by the grandparents, and the grandparents have identified they will not be adopting him. So as a case manager and a therapist, I work with him to work with behaviors, knowing that I know he's not going to be staying with the grandparent, but he doesn't know that. I'm also not in the position to be able to tell him, so I am advocating outside of his and I therapeutic relationship that he be given the opportunity to know and be prepared for movement. At this time, there is no placement for him in a foster care situation. He may be moved out of town, or even go into a group home setting. So the grandmother, while she is really concerned about his overall well-being, just cannot reconcile the fact that he has sexual trauma and that he's exhibiting sexual behaviors. There's now safety concerns for the other children in the home. Her own issues have exacerbated to the point that she has increased anxiety and is unwilling and unable, I should say, not unwilling, but unable to work with him and build that relationship that he needs as a child. In a recent team meeting, it sounded like many of the people were advocating for the sibling and had almost written him off, but the supervisor of the DCS stepped in and said, he's a child. We have to really consider the fact that he has trauma and we can't give up on him. And I agree with that. We can't give up on him, and he is a child, despite how his mother treated him like a young adult. So looking at this, I'm using the ethic model of Congress in that I'm going to examine relevant personal, societal, agency, client, and professional values. I'm going to think about what ethical standard of the NASW Code of Conduct applies, as well as relevant laws and case decisions. I'm going to hypothesize about possible consequences of different decisions. I'm going to identify who will benefit and who will be harmed in view of our commitment as social workers to the most vulnerable, and consult with supervisor and colleagues about what the most ethical choices are. And examine relevant personal. I think about this is a child that he doesn't have the same knowledge and the same way to connect things the way that adults do. And he, yes, may be exhibiting sexual behaviors, but there's trauma underneath that, and there's somewhere he learned that. So to exile him because of something he may not necessarily can control, seems unfair to me and unjust. From society's standpoint, I get that they want to keep siblings together. I understand trying to keep that bond because that's all they have. Their whole support system is turned upside down, and this family in particular doesn't have supports outside of this grandparent at this time. The other grandparent he did have recently and abruptly moved away to Florida, so he has some anger with that. His dad is in prison. He has some anger with that. His mom, his rights with his mom were terminated. He was very close to his mom, and he's angry with that. Outside of that, we don't know what he saw, what happened to him when he was in the home with the mom. His removal from there was due to her substance use, her addictions. Had it not been for that, then he wouldn't be in the situation where he's trying to figure out, or doesn't even know that he's going to be trying to figure out why he wasn't included in this new family system. He may not understand the sibling relationship. There may not be a bond there. We just don't know right now. From an agency perspective, we are contracted to serve the client. Yes, we work with DCS, but I work for Raintree, and so I look at the fact of where are my allegiances, and my allegiances are with making sure that the child receives the services that he needs to be successful. From a client perspective, I have to think, who is my client? My referral now has both he and his grandma, and actually as of this past week, it now has his sister on it. So who is my client? My initial client was the child. Yes, the grandmother has severe issues and things that are very valid. However, she needs to be able to seek services on her own and let us work with him and provide him the services that he can't get as a child. And professional values, ultimately, I have to maintain integrity, and I have to be able to be professional and put my own personal bias aside. I don't have the role of being able to tell him, so I have to continue to work with him as if I don't know this information. And that's hard for me to reconcile, but I do it because that's where my perspective is to be. So when I think about the ethical standard of the NASW, I think about the service. So I have a service to provide, and I am doing that. I am providing that service for behavior management and for structural and change of that nature. From a social justice standpoint, I'm looking at, for this child, who's seeking social justice for this child and making sure that he has an adequate support system, that the family that he lives with loves him, that he is going to be considered as a child and not as someone who has sexual behaviors. I look at dignity and worth of the child, or of the person, and the child having his needs should be met just as much as the needs of the grandmother. So there's an ethical dilemma in the fact that you shouldn't push an issue on a person who has trauma. However, by her not being able to reconcile her own problems, she's unable to build that relationship with him that they will need moving forward. So in hypothesizing, I also look at integrity. So my integrity is, I know these things and I can't disclose them. However, I still have to do the service that I am chartered for. I still have to be competent in what I do, and that leads me to obviously seeking supervision, which I will get into in just a moment. So when I hypothesize about possible outcomes and consequences, I think about what is best for the child, and that kind of reverts back to what the law and what the case studies are. So the Child Abuse and Neglect Policy, the Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act, all are trying to find what reasonable efforts are to keep the family together. However, the concurrent planning was that if parental rights were terminated, they would be adopted. At the time, the understanding was the grandmother would adopt, and she has already filed for adoption. However, he doesn't know she's not going to adopt him. And looking at what are in the best interest of the child, the assurance that if he's removed from a home, he's going to be cared for. If he's not being cared for, then is he really in the best interest of the child to stay there? So with the hypothesis of him staying is that he will not be cared for in the way that he should be, and the hypothesis that if he goes, then he's going to have additional trauma by not being included in that family system. So who's going to benefit and who's going to be harmed? I'm identifying that he will benefit to be moved into a home where he is loved, but he will be harmed by the fact that he's moved from the home that he identifies as being his home. he, again, feels he's going to be adopted. So he is my most vulnerable client at this point. Yes, I understand that the sister has problems too, but again, at the time when this all started, he was my client, and now she's my client, so I find it difficult to advocate for both sides. She's not going to be traumatized as much as he is, so I still think he is the most vulnerable. In consulting with a supervisor and colleagues, the most ethical choice would be to remove the child. It would be in his best interest to be placed in a home where he is provided love and understanding and provided treatment and guidance that helps him develop into the young adult and the young man that he could be. Where he is now, he is not likely to receive these because they are unable to reconcile the trauma that they face themselves. So the child doesn't have the bond that he would likely have had had he lived with his siblings from day one. He has been separated them more than he's been with them. So when DCS looked at it, they are actually looking for another placement for him. The problem is he going to be placed in another foster care placement? Is he going to be in a group home? At this point, there is a family they're seeking that may be able to take him in, that's very loving and very willing to work with him. The last piece of that I don't know is if the daycare knows he has sexual behaviors that he goes to, and does the family he's going to know that he has sexual behaviors? And how do they work that into taking care of him? So I look forward to your responses on my case to see what your thoughts on what the most ethical choice would be. Thank you.